Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our final segment of the day here on the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you, as always, by the GSMC Sports Network. We have another player from the Chiefs defense who I wish to highlight in terms of our IDP player profiles to close out today's show. He is on the other side of Chris Jones, and he is someone who I really think is going to have another breakout year in the NFL, and that is George Karlaftis. When I think of the Kansas City Chiefs defense, right, these two, in Chris Jones and George Karlaftis, are the centripetal forces of what makes this Kansas City Chiefs defense, and especially their defensive front, tick. You have guys like Mike Dana and Derek Nnadi up front, but they're more of like the role player guys. They're more of like the versatility guys who bolster Jones and Karlaftis' few deficiencies, if any. But at the end of the day, when I think about this Chiefs defensive front, I think about Jones and Karlaftis. And Karlaftis, a lot of you might not be savvy to, might not be too knowledgeable of, but I think it's time to get acquainted with this name, because he is going to be a star, especially if Chris Jones ends his contract early, decides to retire earlier than people think. He's really going to take over this Chiefs defensive front and make it his own. So without further ado, let's jump right into what makes George Karlaftis so exciting. Last year, he had an outstanding 166.1 fantasy points, crazy for a defensive end. 29 solo tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 11 sacks, 3 passes defended. And when I think about George Karlaftis, I think about what the Chiefs defense does, because Steve Spagnuolo really likes to vary his defensive schemes. I really believe that George Karlaftis, much like Chris Jones, can play anywhere on the line, and Steve Spagnuolo will be comfortable with it. And what I mean by this is, you can sometimes, if you're the Chiefs, stick a player like Dana or Derek Nnadi either as your main interior defensive tackle and line up Jones and Karlaftis on the outside, and you would have two really excellent pass rushers, one who is more powerful, one who's more athletic. You can really put up the clamps on an opposing QB. Now, I don't think the Chiefs should necessarily think in that manner, because you really do have a lot of open spaces for players of Jones and Karlaftis' caliber to fill. I think that when it comes to plugging the run, there's not much better than Chris Jones. When it comes to pass rushers, there's not someone who is more promising than a guy of George Karlaftis' caliber. And so, Steve Spagnuolo, for as long as he has both of them together, can, in many different ways, vary these defenses so that they aren't as stagnant as other times he may have had issues with the defense. And so, when I think about George Karlaftis and where he can improve, we talk about this 4-3 front. I think the improvement will stem from what Steve Spagnuolo wants from him and what you might want from him, intriguingly enough, as a fantasy or IDP manager. In a 4-3 defense, George Karlaftis' role, as he might play on the left side of the line, is to mainly rush the passer, but also get in the backfield. And so, when I look at George Karlaftis and look at his pass rushing savvy, that spells two things that I can see him being boosted on. One is tackles for loss, and two is forced fumbles. Those two stats, in my honest opinion, as someone who is getting into IDP, seem like stats that really stand out in terms of how diversely you want to look into your defensive ends. Because edge rushers mainly are looking for sacks from them, but still, you need one of your guys to at least have the ability to turn it on in certain areas that could be the difference between you winning and losing a game. George Karlaftis represents that. He's in a system where he knows that he can eventually become the best player, but he's not necessarily focused on being the best. He's focused on doing what's best for the team. And if he can truly wrap his mind around that, truly get into that mindset, then I don't necessarily think he has to fill Chris Jones' shoes once he leaves. But he's someone who knows what Steve Spagnuolo wants. He's someone who knows that the Chiefs' defense is predicated on their physicality rather than immediate pressure on the QB. And he can trust in the fact that as a star player, he's more of an everyman than a guy who's going to get you 15 to 20 sacks a year. Now here's the caveat that I view. Will he be distracted by Chris Jones' big money contract? And while it seems like an interesting question to ask in terms of fantasy terms, it's an important question to understand in terms of the play and the style of play, especially, the Chiefs will employ with both of these guys. Because by tying down Chris Jones, who is on the older side, to 4 years, that's 4 years of George Karlaftis' career in which either A, he improves rapidly and he proves his versatility, or B, more of a premium is put on allowing Chris Jones to be happy and comfortable in many different roles. And so, looking at George Karlaftis as someone who is still up and coming, I think that you have to be cautious of how in future years you draft him. Say this year he does have a breakout year. He boosts his stats in every single category I talked about with him, and he cements himself as someone who can be the running mate with Chris Jones in that front. The next 3 years after that, you then have to consider the fact that, hey, I like this Karlaftis guy, but how is Chris Jones really affecting him? How is, having someone who is still going to be schemed more often affecting him? And so, when you're someone on this team who is young and a lot of people have high hopes for you, but are still with someone who's had so much experience throughout his career on this team, knows this team so well, knows the defensive scheme so well, how does that affect your style of play? And furthermore, when you're in contract talks, how does having a guy who has really dominated your first couple of years of your career, especially the before prime years of your career as you're getting into your prime, how has that affected your style of play? That's the question the Chiefs have to answer in terms of whether or not they really believe that George Karlaftis is the guy. Because at the end of the day, I really like sitting here and saying George Karlaftis adds value to your IDP team. But how much is what's important to me. Because it's all fine and dandy to be the edge rusher who's more athletically inclined, can get into the backfield, his pass rushing moves, maybe open up a couple lanes for your linebackers to get in on the fun. But at the end of the day, George Karlaftis is going to have to learn to preserve the best ideals of this offense in order to make it as potent as possible. And at the end of the day, I really don't think that Chris Jones' contract should affect him, because it should allow him to have more freedom, ironically enough. Now that Chris Jones is tied down, I have to prove that I should be tied down as well when my time comes. And so, George Karlaftis has to absorb the pressure as it comes and not be afraid to grow and expand his pass rush arsenal and expand on what he knows he can improve upon. Because, trust me, I believe that this guy is a really special player that the Chiefs have their hands on. But that should just about do it for this show. Please consider liking, following, subscribing to both the show and the network. Also, if you do feel so inclined, consider leaving a tip or donation to the link in the description. GSMC.cloud is a huge support to both me, my fellow podcasters, and ultimately the network as a whole. But this was yet another edition of the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. I've been Christopher Shepard. Thank you guys yet again for tuning in. We'll be back and better than ever tomorrow for another edition of the show. Thank you guys so much.